Well, hello there, YouTube, and welcome to another live oil painting session. So after a while, I was staring at the painting that we were working on for the past, I think, like month or so, and I think that painting is complete for the most part. What's left is just maybe like a few fine details, but I'd rather let that painting dry for some time before doing any more touch-ups on it. So I decided we're going to start another series, which is going to be the complete contrast from what we were doing before, which was those more finished paintings, to a series of more loose and energetic paintings to kind of liven up the mood. So this painting in particular, this series of paintings are going to be smaller paintings, around 8 by 10 inches to, let's say, 9 by 12 inches, still life and portraits, and everything in between. The goal is to create paintings here that I will sell on my Etsy. Once again, I haven't sold paintings or even put paintings on Etsy for a while, so the link is in the comments section of this video and in the description. So it is for sale at the moment, even though we didn't start it. I don't expect you to buy it while we're painting, although if you do, that would be awesome. What you're going to have is a painting demonstration, and eventually in the future, if you're interested in this painting, you have the opportunity to buy it. Remember, first come, first serve with these paintings. So I'm going to start with raw umber for my base, or the platform. This is just a standard bell pepper, although I do like painting bell peppers, and I also like cooking them and eating them, but for this one, it's actually on a platform that is right above, so you can't quite see the platform, which is why I took a picture of it for you so you could see it, see at least a picture of it. The platform is raised in perspective, so it's a little bit higher than my viewpoint, so I'm looking up at it slightly, which is why there's a different perspective on the picture than what you're used to. With still life, you're used to looking down at the image, and here we're kind of going to be looking up. So I'm going to place the bell pepper not in the center but lower relative to the center. I'm going to use the umber sketch method. Hey Stephanie. So I'm going to use the umber sketch method to start this, just like we did with all the other ones. And since this is going to be a painting that I will finish today, the preliminary drawing is going to be a little more tight, so I'm drawing it much more carefully with more precision than I would, say, just a painting that I'm going to work on for an extended period of time. So there's the contour of the bell pepper. Bell peppers are fun because they have planes to them. I mean, all kind of organic matter has planes to it, but bell peppers are especially, they're kind of like the buff, let's say, organic things that we can paint. They've got like muscles to them, it feels. And these are the planes that I'm drawing in. The light and shadow is quite simple. The shadow just begins at about here, and all of this is in shade. So I'm going to sketch that in. I like to use raw umber to draw, but not so much to paint with. So this is just going to be my drawing, and I'll paint right over top of this. Now I gotta be very cautious with the platform. Now remember, creating a painting in one session is gotta be one of the most stressful things in the world. So for me to be able to stomach this, I have to break it up into individual parts. Hey Bert 2008. Oh good, I'm glad you like the idea of the bell pepper. The wine glass, that funny thing, the wine glass is actually not in my still life. It was there because it was in another still life that I was working on. But the wine glass is in there in spirit. I forgot to move it when I was taking the picture of this. And actually right behind the wine glass, it looks like it's wine, but it's actually not wine. There's a copper still life object behind it. So that's a whole other still life that I'm working on. So I just recently set up my still life booth. I mean, I've had still life booths before, but this one is more or less, I guess, the fanciest still life setup I've ever had. Let's see if I can show you the setup. I just have to move my camera and hope that it doesn't disconnect, which it might, but anyway, there it is. So there's my setup. It's on an old TV stand, and you can see there's a LED light right above it. So this is a very convenient setup for me, just because I can stand and paint still life, which you know that I prefer to stand when I'm painting, and it just gives me just the most leeway, I think, if I'm able to move around rather than sitting and painting a still life. Alright, so that's about it for the drawing. Now I'm gonna use Perelyne Red. Because this is an Alla Prima and Perelyne Red is such a slow dryer, it only makes sense that I use Perelyne Red. It's also a nice and fiery red. It's a fiery yellow-orangey red. It leans a little towards the blue. So bear with me here. This is going to be the part in the painting where it's going to look like a complete mess before it starts to look like something remotely realistic. And what we're going to go for is realistic with this one. So that's alizarin. So I'm going in with the dark accents right away. And the most important thing is to push the contrast between light and shadow. So I'm going to have to go between Alizarin Crimson, Perelyne Red, Cadmium Red, all of the different kind of fiery reds, and of course contrast it with green. And I'm going to use a plethora of brushes. A cheap SAT word there for you. I'm going to have to use a ton of brushes for this, as everything is going to be wet on wet. It's going to be brush after brush. This is going to evolve almost like magic. And that's the fun part with still life. It's not that demanding on likeness. Who cares about the likeness of a bell pepper? It's more about the form of the bell pepper, the structure of the bell pepper. Bell peppers are great for if you're struggling with planes and structure. It's a great exercise to do. Now that value is dangerously close to being in the light, so I'm going to dull it down. And it is kind of in the light. I'll just leave it at that for now. So I'm going for the kill with each one of these decisions that I'm making here. Not wasting any time. There's a plane in between these two. And we'll go now to Cadmium Red. And it's very important to have an extensive palette if you're going to be doing still life. Especially if you're doing still life under natural light or a bright fluorescent light. This is a bright fluorescent light. A bit more of the red. So once again, those of you that have just signed on, this is a different series that we're starting now. And these are smaller paintings that I'm hoping to sell. So this painting is already for sale, and as you can tell, I've lowered the price on these paintings. Contrary to the rest of the world, I'm not going to be inflating my prices. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create paintings that are more suitable for sale, as opposed to paintings that I'm spending months on in the studio. So this is going to be a way to contrast what I'm doing. And for those of you that are not interested in buying paintings from me, it'll be a fun experience for you to witness how I create paintings that I eventually will sell. Well, that's a lot of work getting all those planes in for the bell pepper. Okay, so once we get out here, this is a side plane, very, very dark, but not as dark as the shadow tones. Hold on, we got a robot to deal with. All right, the robot has been dealt with. How did I learn oil painting? I started studying oil painting when I was between 17 and 18 years of age, so a couple months before I turned 18. And this was in 2009-ish. And I got lucky. I took classes with really, really, really good painters. So I'm not really self-taught for the most part because I do have such great teachers. I started off studying with an impressionist painter by the name of John Ebersberger, and I would take impressionist painting, which would be still life, painted in daylight. So actually in the sunlight we would paint still lifes, and it would teach you how to work with color. And then in his class I met another painter by the name of Pauldin Hamilton, who studied with another painter named Ron Schur in the Art Students League. And Pauldin Hamilton is just such an excellent teacher and such an excellent painter. And then after studying with Pauldin Hamilton, I went to Studio Incaminati in Philadelphia, and I studied there with students of Nelson Shanks. Nelson Shanks is, of course, my superhero. If you've never heard of Nelson Shanks, definitely look him up. I think he was one of the best painters of the 20th century, and he lived into the 21st century. He passed away in 2015. So when you're going for a bright light on your reds, try to go for yellow or orange first. See how that gives me a bright red, even though it's orange and not red. And I have to blur my eyes to see color. And I'm painting colors in relation to one another, just like my impressionist teacher taught me so many years ago. Okay, so now we're going to put in the very bright highlights, which are kind of bluish in nature. So I'm going to go with a weak blue, a nice and subtle blue, which is Cerulean Blue. I'm using lead white, and only lead white. This may look like a bunch of different white oil paint, but it's just lead white. So after I put in a few highlights, I'm going to start to go and tackle the environment in this still life. By the way, after the stream, the Etsy listing with this painting for sale will be edited. I will change the picture. I won't change the price or anything, but I'll change the picture. So blurring my eyes. There's such a nice variety of different reds in this painting, or should I say in this still life, that I want to capture. Hey Bert, in 10 minutes you learned a lot. Awesome. This way of painting is like I liken it to the Fast and Furious. There's a lot that can be done in a short amount of time, but it is risky. Like all things in life, everything has its risks, and the risk with this is the drawing. And that's why I was a little strategic with choosing a bell pepper, because with the bell pepper I can go for the effects, the painting effects right away, and not worry too much about the likeness. If this were a portrait, I would have to worry about the likeness right away. I would spend much longer drawing it. Though I am capable of doing alla prima portraits, they are definitely the most complicated of all alla prima portraits to do, or alla prima paintings to do. And since these streams are only an hour and 45 minutes, still life and landscape is the best option for me. So I'm using lead tin yellow and a little bit of cadmium orange. I used the T-square in the beginning because there's no way I'm going to try and draw a straight line. I always laugh at the joke when people tell me they can't even draw a straight line, because I can't draw a straight line. And I've been drawing and painting for 13 years. Here's where it starts to get fun. Well, the whole thing is fun, but when you paint under any kind of light condition, whether you are in the daylight, in the artificial light, or whatever, color relationships become more apparent than when you're painting from a photo reference. So for example, on this table or on this piece of wood, I see more of these blue greenish colors starting to show up in the highlights. Not the highlights, but in the light on the table. So it ranges from yellow, orangey, maybe violetish over here, and it goes greenish on the edge there. So we're putting in color relationships now. Color relationships are when you relate one color to another color, and you judge the color that you are trying to paint not based on just the color in isolation, but what it looks like surrounded by other colors. And it's the same thing with portrait, with anything really. So please feel free to ask me any art-related questions. And don't forget, this painting will be, or is, for sale already. So if you like what you see and you want your shot at owning this before anyone else, by all means, feel free to purchase it. I'm able to send paintings anywhere in the US, in the UK, Canada, all over the place. I guess most places. Not everywhere, but most places. If you know what I mean. So now the side plane of this wooden panel is a brownish green. So I want to cover all the way up to the edge. Let's use some Indian yellow. Lead tin yellow. And I'm more or less just mixing intuitively. And remember, if you want to see a longer painting process, you know, a more detailed painting, definitely check out my previous streams. I also have a playlist of the live oil painting sessions, of which this one is also in that playlist now. So definitely feel free to check that out. Emilica, how did you learn to paint still life? Do you have formal training? Who is your mentor? My first teacher was, or is, primarily a still life painter, though he's an excellent portraitist too. John Ebersberger, who studied with Henry Henchy. Henry Henchy is one of the most famous American impressionists you might not have ever heard of. Most influential in color painting. And yeah, we did still lives for the most part. When I went to studio in Caminati in Philadelphia, we also did a lot of still life drawing for the most part, and some painting when we moved into color study. Though most of my training is portrait and figure, which, by the way, in my online classes I'm teaching figure now, not just portrait. In any case, pretty much all along I've been studying still life, whether it be the classical approach or the alla prima. I tend to really like alla prima for the aesthetic of it. For me, a highly rendered still life is great to look at, but can be kind of a little bit mundane. I like paintings that have an energy to them. Now I'm covering all the way down to the bottom of the board. So there's the top of the board. Now I'm going to go for the background. Question, do you think acrylic paint is good to start for beginners in oil paint? I would say oil painting is a little bit more lenient for those of you that are just getting into painting. That is because I'm an oil painter, so if you ask an acrylic painter, they're going to say acrylic paint. Or if you ask someone that uses both, then that's a 50-50. But I'd say oil painting is better for beginners because it does not dry. You're able, I mean, it does dry, obviously, but it doesn't dry very quickly. So you have hours to correct something, whereas with acrylic, it's going to dry on you in like 5 minutes, which some could say it's an advantage because then you just layer over top of it. But from my experience, especially with portraiture, Oil paint is the easier solution for those of you that are just getting started with painting. And remember, I teach online classes, so I'm able to provide more guidance education-wise in that setting in the online classes. So now I'm going in with the background, but again, feel free to ask any questions. I'm not going to withhold information from you, just because this is a public painting demonstration. This is a very fun color to paint. It is Pthalo Turquoise diluted with a bunch of whatever was already on my palette. Anytime you dilute phthalo and make a more subtle blue, it's a very, very beautiful color to contrast other colors from. So this phthalo diluted with whatever this was on the palette really does bring up more contrast in the reds. Now you can see the painting is almost completely covered, and it's almost the 30-minute mark. Once we cover this whole thing, we're going to go to town on the bell pepper, and we're going to make it look more and more realistic. The secret to painting alla prima is knowing your classical painting. If you know your classical painting, you can take shortcuts with alla prima. And when you know how to take the shortcuts, painting can become a lot of fun. Not that it's not fun when you're doing classical, but more fun in the sense that you can kind of get away with things. Still life painting is also, since you don't have to worry about likeness, just like with landscape, still life painting provides an opportunity to hone in on the craft and not so much the likeness of the object that you're painting. Meaning you can learn to render, you can learn to push color, you can learn so many things so much faster if you paint still life as opposed to only painting portrait, because it's so forgiving. And this is one of the best ways, next to painting landscapes, that you can also work on your color. If you struggle with color, commission portrait is not the way you want to go about learning color, because your mind is just somewhere else. So painting still life or landscape, and I would say more still life, provides more of an opportunity for you to push a little bit more, experiment a little bit more. And when you contrast this to your long-term paintings, you will see that they both complement each other really well. Now we're going to push some color notes here. So what I mean by note is spots of color. Each spot of color is going to be a note. And right here I'm seeing one of the brightest red notes. So bright the camera can't even capture it. So one of my biggest goals with these still lives is to capture life in the painting. Not just literally describe what the thing is in a kind of cold mechanical sense, but life. What it really feels like to look at something, what it really feels like to observe something. And now with the background, I'm going to put a fade, light to dark, to contrast. I also have to make an effort to cover all the way to the top because this painting is for sale. I'm not going to sell something that's not covered. Or I guess I could. Depends on what you want. Have I painted a green pepper? Yeah, at some point in my life I'm sure I have. I just can't remember. We can paint a green pepper next time if you want. I think I have a green one, unless I ate it. Yeah, I bought a pack of bell peppers. There was a yellow, a green, and a red. I think I ate the yellow one. Now I'm using Ultramarine Blue. Ultramarine Blue is going to be in this vicinity. Obviously still with a little bit of Pthalo Turquoise. Question, what background would you put on a green pepper or a lime or avocado? So something greenish, what would I put in the background? Good question. I like to contrast, so it's no surprise that this background leans towards the greenish. So for that, I'd probably change it up to something towards the, let's say towards the brown, a brownish background. It's a little cliche if I put the exact complementary color. So it's not like I put Viridian in the background and just let it be Viridian. That would be too cliche. So I went with a grayed out phthalo. And in this part of the painting in particular, I have to paint over the line and then bring the line back. I need to get rid of that line now. So I'm going to have to paint right over top of that line. And then use the... Oh, here's a nice trick here. Watch this. Fail. I wasn't supposed to get the red there. I want to pull some lead tin yellow through a left-handed brush stroke. You know what? Screw it. I'll just use my left hand. Left-handed brush stroke. There we go. So that gives a nice sharp light. Now I can go back with the background. There's such an energy to paintings like this. There's a certain life to these kind of paintings. I'm going to use Dioxazine purple now for this part. A certain kind of life to these paintings that you can't quite get in a longer study. And there's something in a longer study that you can't get in this kind of painting. So they all complement each other. Now I'm dulling the colors out. Don't think that I'm just putting straight purple. or straight turquoise. You'll have to know your hue value and chroma. You do not want to throw the brightest chroma everywhere. The brightest chroma in this painting has to be in the light here, here, and here. Now when this is framed and hanging potentially in your home, this painting should be receiving a nice amount of light. So you should have a light on this painting, and this painting will glow because of the colors that I'm using and because of the values. There should be a bright light just emanating from this bell pepper. Hey Napoleon, what colors are on the palette? This is the same 18 color palette that I've had for every painting. And there's an addition of raw umber, but I didn't paint with it. I used it to draw, and I may have put a touch of it there by mistake, but the same 18 color palette that's listed in the description. Starting with burnt sienna and then ending with dioxazine in purple. Okay, so the background is in there. Maybe you need to soften this dark shape a tad bit. There we go. And now we're going to go to town on the bell pepper. So, first thing I'm going to do is pick an area to start to refine. And I'm going to choose this little muscle, let's just call it. Maybe that's weird. Let's just call it a bell pepper-like structure. Bell pepper-like structure. So we're going to start off closer to the shadow. Hey, Canvas Dancer. Oh, that painting. I think it's almost finished. For the most part, there's barely anything left on the face with that painting, and I'm going to just put it aside, let it dry, oil it out, do any touch-ups I need to, and then photograph it. But I think that one's mostly done. And this is a new series, Canvas Dancer, a new series of paintings that I will do much faster in each session, and I will have them for sale on my Etsy. So I'm hoping I'll be able to sell this bell pepper painting. Hey Jacko1. Oh, I'm glad that my videos help keep you inspired and motivated to keep painting. Thank you so much. Oh, thanks Napoleon. So remember everyone, this painting is for sale, and when I put the posting, I didn't of course have the picture of the painting because I would have had to time travel to have the picture of the completed painting. But you can see that the price is already there. I have lowered my price, unlike the rest of the world, so it's priced so that it is attainable for more people than my prices were before. So if you're watching this as a pre-recorded video, there is a chance that this painting is still for sale. So please see the comment section. The top, the pinned comment is going to have the link to the to my Etsy store where you can buy this painting. Those of you watching this that aren't interested in buying it, wish me luck. What's fun is if somebody decides to paint this during the stream, you will hear my iPad, which is right next to me, make a cha-ching sound, and I'll probably jump. Hey, Misty Artist. Oh, thank you. I'm adjusting the edge. Remember, I'm just working on this shape. And let's use a little bit of violet. Violet goes towards the blue spectrum of red. Not all of the edges are going to be the same. Some edges are going to be softer, some edges are going to be sharper. So do not paint all your edges the same softness or sharpness. In this case, I need to sharpen this edge. And that will draw the attention of the viewer, and it'll also create a glow, which is what I'm going for. Once again, the main purpose here is to create a sense of light. Okay, so I'm going to cool the surrounding colors down a tad bit more. I am pushing the colors in relation to one another. I'm not trying to match the colors. This is all about colors in relation to other colors. Yes, this is a 8 by 10 inch. Very careful with these edges. Extremely careful. So that edge is going to be softer. Go with Ultramarine Blue, more white. And I love putting stuff like that in the background. It's almost like an aurora borealis. Probably mispronounced that, but oh well. Well, thanks, Lorraine, for favoriting my shop. There we go. Now we're starting to get some form in the conversation. We'll push the highlight. The highlight is towards the blue. Each plane change is a color change. So since each plane change is a color change, there is no such thing as a light red, dark red, middle red. They're all different variations of red. They are different colors. Remember, color has hue, value, chroma. And remember, you are not making a one-to-one representation of the still life in front of you. It's impossible. There are not enough colors available in the world for painting, even photography for that point, at that point, to perfectly represent life. What we do is we use the limited colors that we have to create an analogy of life. The more you learn, the more you find how complex color is. It would be foolish for me to just underpaint this black and white and then glaze it with red and call it a day. There's way more beauty and harmony to these planes. This is the story of the bell pepper. Okay, so all throughout this section, there's a sense of light, and it is not so orangey, it's kind of closer to the pink. So for pink you can have so many different variations of pink. I could go with any of the reds here and put white, and it's going to be pink. So what I did instead was I went right into what I already had mixed on this part of the palette. And one thing you'll notice is I like to paint into old puddles. So they seem like they're all over the place, but now I'm actually starting to paint into my old puddles. Hey, Milika, do I only sell on Etsy? Not necessarily. I've sold some paintings in private. I've used Venmo to have some transactions. I think I used Zelle one time. But for now, this one will only be on Etsy for the time being. Now, if anyone's interested in purchasing this painting through Venmo, we can set that up if you want to. But Etsy is just an easier way for me to create a listing. And now it becomes more of a dark orangey. Now about a week after this painting, a week after today, a week from the time this is created, I will varnish it with Gamvar gloss. I like to use Gamvar gloss varnish. Gamvar picture varnish is a painting varnish like any other varnish, which means it's fully removable by art conservationists. It protects the painting from things like coffee spilling on it, or just protecting it from the elements. And Gamvar is what you can use if your painting has been recently created, say within the past 6 months. If your painting is older than 6 months, you can use Demar varnish. Hey Barbara. Oh, I missed one from Napoleon. What brands of paints do I use? My bad. I have a whole bunch of brand. I have my lead white is Michael Harding, my chrome yellow, and my orange molybdate. These are Rublev's. My cadmium red deep is Old Holland. My cadmium green, in fact, most of my cadmiums are either Gamblin or Winsor and Newton. And my medium is Gamblin. So yeah, Gamblin. Gamblin, Winsor, Newton, Old Holland, a bunch of them. Hey Barbara, thanks for your comment. Oh, I'm glad that you finished that painting. Can't wait to see it in the virtual classroom. Hey Kay and Maine. Oh, I'm glad that you like how I paint still life. Hey Milika, so you don't have a website? No, I don't have a website where I'm selling my paintings. I used to have a website for my paintings, but I just haven't really been able to maintain it, so it's probably not even working at the moment. My paintings, you can view them on Etsy, however. Not Etsy, excuse me, Instagram. Etsy only has one painting, and that's this one. But if you want to see my more finished paintings, please check out my Instagram. Hey Napoleon, you like the Masters Touch brand? That's a good brand, though it's a little closer towards the student grade, but it's a nice cheaper alternative. Now I'm very carefully softening that edge, very carefully. Now as we move here, there's another strip of red, bright red, and as I say that, I realize I might have to change the light sensitivity so you can see it a little better. Okay, so squinting down. Remember, squint to see value and blur your eyes to see color. This is actually a brighter pink. It's distracting that I have the highlight right next to it. The highlight kind of blinds me from seeing the true color, or should I say the true value. All one and the same. Hey you, thank you. Napoleon, when you do landscapes, you use Bob Ross paints. Do you like those? I've never used them. Okay, so blurring my eyes. Once again to see value. Now red cannot get any brighter than a fiery orange red. I'm putting in more orange here to lighten the value. And right under here there's a reflection that I haven't quite painted yet, and you can kind of see it in the reference. In fact, the position is different from the reference. I'm looking more straight at the still life. Be careful, I gotta make sure that that edge remains sharp. Okay, so now to paint in another highlight, I'm going to actually switch. So this is a bluish highlight, this one will go towards the violet. So even the highlights are going to have different values. Alright, so we've got another robot. I'm going to get rid of and report. Okay, a robot has been reported. Robot has been dealt with. Let's use some lead tin yellow. Now I'm going to return to the shadow, and I'm going to push the shadow value even darker. Now when I can't go any darker with alizarin, I have to add a little bit of Dioxazine purple. Can we look at? Don't worry, please feel free to ask any art related questions. So how long do oil paints last? You have some that are 50 years old and they seem okay. Well, it all depends on the conditions of how they're kept. I mean, oil paint is just linseed oil and pigment. Some oil paints have like a, let's say, a preservative in them, but for the most part it's just linseed oil and pigment. Pigment itself, it can sit for years and not have any problems. I mean, like years. I don't know about 50 years, but it could potentially sit there for 50 years and be fine. Linseed oil is a different story. So if linseed oil is exposed to oxygen, that oil paint will dry in the tube. And if it dries in the tube, you can add a little more linseed oil to loosen up the paint. So it all depends on how it's kept. Another potential problem with oil paints in their tube, if they're kept for a long time, is if the tube or the cap is cracked or something, and that'll let oxygen in and the paint will dry. The cast shadow is a kind of greenish blue that leans towards the violet. Once again, I'm diluting these colors. I'm gonna have to overpaint into the bell pepper and then paint over the top of that. Did I do a color study before this painting? Nope, I just jumped right into it. And with still life, I'm usually able to just jump right into it and explore the way that colors work in relation to one another on the spot. So it is a good idea to do a color study before every paint. Edward, yeah, a greenish blue that leans violet. And I tend to think color, kind of in the color wheel a little bit. So green blue, meaning I used, what did I use? I think I used Ultramarine blue. I might have used a little bit of Viridian and then made it violet by putting some Dioxazine purple. For the still life painting, do you use thick paint or thin? I saw your video of the Master of Studies of Rembrandt, and that's a huge amount of paint. This is almost that much paint, almost as thick as a Rembrandt. So yes, you're correct. There is a lot of paint in this. With Alla Prima, you would benefit most from using thick paint rather than painting it very thin, because of the nature of oil paint. Think of a John Singer Sargent quote. If you haven't heard this quote, here it goes. And if you have heard this quote, then just a recap. The thicker you paint, the more it flows. That's a John Singer Sargent quote. Particularly with Alla Prima, the more paint you use, the more control you will have. And the paint will seem to flow more smoothly. What do I use to dilute? If I want to thin out the paint, I think I only used my medium once. It's Neo-Megilp, this little jelly thing right here, which is kind of funny. You see the edge of my palette there. That's my Neo-Megilp. On the webcam, it's right there. And I think I just used it for the background in some parts, but not really much for the still life. And that's true. Colors would not change as they dry like acrylic. And they do sink in once in a while, and sinking in is when the previous layer absorbs some of the oil. And the way to correct that, or not so much correct, but the way to change that is if you add, if you oil out the painting. But that's like more what we did with the long-term painting. Hey, Edward Soda, you think your brain just fell off? Oh no. Nah, we don't need brains for the most part, do we? I'm just kidding. And there's some of a reflection. I'm gonna go with Ultramarine Blue. A little bit of a bluish reflection here. And another benefit to using thicker paint is when you paint with a lot of paint, for lack of better words. You can layer it by adding thinner paint over top of thicker paint. And most of you are probably familiar with that, because I think most of you are familiar with Bob Ross. And he would do that. He would thin out his paint with his odorless mineral spirits, and he would add it, like his tree branches, he would add that way. So that's another benefit to using thicker paint. A little bit of detail for the bell pepper. Remember, this painting is for sale. It can be in your living room. And I will adjust the photo after the stream. So here is what the sale looks like right now. So it just says in progress because the painting is in progress at the moment. Remember, a link to that is in the comment section at the top pinned comment. Also, it is in the description box of the video. Hey Napoleon, who's your favorite still life painter? Luis Melendez, I think, is one of my favorite still life painters. I think he's from like the 18th century. Also Nelson Shanks, but he's my favorite painter for anything. Carlo Russo is a really good still life painter alive today. So we've got another robot. So you're going to get blocked, banned, and reported. Nelson Shanks was born, I don't know if he was born in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, but he's American. Luis Melendez is French, I believe, even though the name Melendez is not French. I don't really know where Melendez is from, actually, so I don't know. He's just one of my favorite still life painters. Now there's a little bit of reflected light. For reflected lights, try as much as you can to use a color change before you use a value change. There's these bluish reflected lights. They almost don't even show up on the camera. Now some reflected lights, like this one, they are a value change. Hey, Swarna. Thanks for watching from India. Do I work in acrylic paints? I don't, but I have in the past. I have one YouTube video tutorial on acrylics. I don't use acrylic primarily because I don't know, and scientists just can't know yet how archival it is. So it's only been developed recently, like I think 50 years ago, or I don't know, probably less or more than that. I think it was developed in the 1950s, what people tell me. Whereas oil paint has been around since Van Eyck, 16th century, I think almost as far back as the 15th century. So I know that these paintings will last potentially hundreds of years. I like the idea of that, creating something that I know will last hundreds of years. So that's one of the main reasons I use oil paint. I also just love the way it handles. And I think the color variety in oil paint is much stronger. Because you have things like lead white and chrome yellow, lead tin yellow. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Why is Nelson Shanks my favorite painter? Nelson Shanks is my favorite painter because, historically speaking, I think he's one of the first realist painters to adapt the American Impressionist or French Impressionist color to realist painting, also combining more loose and energetic painting styles such as that Thomas Eakins and Sargent had, applying that into more realist, modern looking paintings is what he is known for. Also his portraits of famous people. But don't just look at his portraits of famous people because those are commissions he had to do. They had to look a certain way, but look at his finished studio paintings. And his sketches, his demos are incredible. So Bruno, acrylic paints for artists are around since 1940 in the US, 82 years. Yeah, you see, there's some people that are older than acrylic paint alive and walking around today. So, you know, I just don't know if it will be archival, and it probably will be. I mean, in like another 500 years, I'm sure there's going to be acrylic paintings that were made today or this year. But don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on acrylic paint. Don't hate something just because you don't understand it. Just admit you don't understand it, which is what I'm doing. So I'm changing the hue a little bit, and in order to get this color without it going gray, red cannot go towards orange, it will become brown. Red can, however, go towards blue. So this looks kind of almost greenish, but I'm not going to put green, I'm going to put blue into it. And I'm going to have to change brushes for this one. I have to clean off a brush, actually. So Bruno, if you use PVA acrylic gesso panels, you have that problem anyway. That is true. This is oil primed linen, so it's already pre-prepared with an oil primer, but it should have a PVA acrylic on it. So yes, there is that problem, but the majority of the painting is going to be mainly oil paint. But if you want to get into the specifics of that, the reason PVA, I think that's what it is, the reason there's an acrylic gesso or primer for oil paintings now, The reason that's the standard is that the old standard, which was rabbit skin glue, has the problem that over the years it takes in moisture from the surrounding environment and has been accredited to being the leading cause of cracking in old master paintings. Whereas the PVA acrylic does not take in, at least it has been shown to not take in as much moisture from the air. And then when you cover that with something highly archival like lead paint, it should last. But who knows, really? You have a good point. I've thought of that in the past as well. So like I said, we really can't know. Alright, so let's make this towards the blue. Napoleon. Well, that's one way to think about it. Hey, beautiful dreamer. I like your username. You're learning to paint with water mixable oil paints. How do you feel about them compared to regular oil paints? So it depends on what brand that you're using. I like Cobra Talon's water mixable oil paints. I prefer those over the Winsor Newton Artisan. However, if you're using the Winsor Newton Artisan or any other brand, it's okay. They are a little less creamy, further away from the feeling of regular oil paints. Cobra Talons has almost the same feel to them as traditional oil paints. So I would use Cobra Talons. The problem with Cobra Talons is they don't have the color range that we have in traditional oil paints. For example, you're not going to find lead tin yellow or lead white or lead anything in Cobra Talons. But what you're going to get is a nice prismatic range. And it's not like I don't use it. I do use it sometimes if I'm going to do a color study or something like that. See, I have a Cobra tube of paint right here. This is Cobra Titanium White. So it's not like I don't use it. I just don't like that it takes longer to dry. So Bruno, you prefer oil paint too? And let's see. Yeah, I'd agree with you there. But I mean, nothing against acrylic paint. Now you have that bluish. Although looking at my computer, this does not show up on my camera. Let's see if I can mess around with the light sensitivity. Okay, there it is. Now you can see this reflection that I'm putting in. It's closer to the blue. I didn't use green, which is what it actually looks like, because it would go brown. Yes, regular oil paints do dry faster than water mixable oil paints. They market water mixable oil paints as faster drying than oil paint, and they might have some like scientific tests to show that, but in practice I've never seen at least Cobra or Holbein or Winsor Newton water mixables ever dry faster than traditional. But they do dry eventually. And I would definitely recommend that over acrylic if you're trying to avoid toxicity. And remember that the most toxic thing in oil paint is not the oil paint, it's the solvent. So if you practice proper studio safety, you will be perfectly fine. Number one, don't get your hands all in the paint and then eat or drink at the same time. And when you use solvent, you see here, I don't have that much solvent in this cup. Don't have that much solvent out and you'll be fine. Do not use like a big bucket of odorless mineral spirits and just spraying it all over the place. That will definitely expose you to toxicity. I think you might know where I'm getting that from. So you'll be fine toxicity wise if you use traditional. But if you feel more comfortable with water mixable, you have that option. Especially lead white, it dries faster on average than titanium white. Remember, lead white or flake white, however you want to call it, has this property of which it allows you to use more of it without raising the value too much, therefore allowing you to have a thicker consistency of paint. It also allows you to have more control in the mid-range. And most of the stuff happens in the mid-range. Oh, thanks, Napoleon. Okay, so standing back, I see that there is even more of a level of subtlety I can get in the middle lights on this bell pepper. The biggest thing is probably the reflected light. When I blur my eyes, this reflected light is actually lighter. And it's not so much a reflected light in the shadows, it's a reflection in the light plane itself. So I'm just going to mess around. I'm going to use more white this time. And see how much white I added to it and it doesn't raise the value that much? And you see, it allows me to have a thicker consistency of paint. That is the beauty of lead white. Not just nice to have in portrait, but also in still life too. Now we're going to make this bell pepper look like you can just pick it up and chop it up and fry it and eat it. Obviously you don't want to chop up the painting and fry it and eat it and you'll get sick. Alright, so we got another, see here. Another robot. Either that or a person that has nothing to do. Amazing, this red does not show up on the camera. It's crazy, it does not show up. So this bell pepper starting to reach a level that it cannot be picked up on my camera. Either I have a really crappy camera, which I don't. It is a pretty decent camera. This is a very complicated light setup. Like I said, now I'm just revisiting all of these planes. Not so much adding to them anymore, but refining them. Oh, Stephanie Thompson, thank you so much for the super chats. And what we have for super chats is our super chat Grumpy Cat, saying thank you so much to Stephanie Thompson for your super chat. Thank you so much for your support on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much. You have no idea how much that helps me out. So thank you so much. A 3D printer, 16 million colors just aren't enough. Yep, that's true. 16 million colors still wouldn't come close to the beauty and elegance that we have in nature. So once again, thank you so much, Stephanie Thompson. And we're just about almost there with this painting. So once again, remember, everyone that is watching this painting is currently available for sale on my Etsy. And if you're watching this as a pre-recorded video, there's a good chance that this painting is still available for purchase. As you can see, I've lowered the price on my paintings so that these paintings are better for a broad audience. It's a shame I can't quite get the light to show you the color, even if I use my phone. Oh, there we go. I'm using my phone now for the light. So you can see there's much more luminosity to this painting than meets the eye of the camera. Hey Teresa, thank you. So remember, this is the start of a series of paintings now. A new one each time. And that's not an easy thing to do, so wish me luck. All of these paintings created in this series will be available for purchase. Okay, so the next thing to do is amp up the reflection in the shadow so that this doesn't look too flat. And it's taken on more of a, I have to blur my eyes, but I think it's more of a cherry red. I gotta be very careful. This can slip out of proportion and look too light if I'm not careful. Hey, beautiful dancer, thank you. And I'll be back same time on Tuesday. Remember, these streams, these public streams are every Tuesday and Thursday from 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to amp up the accent so this doesn't look like it's floating so much. I'm going to go with Ultramarine Blue, Alizarin. I'm going to amp up the accent. Remember, an accent is when one form meets another form, blocks out the light, and gives you the darkest dark relative to all the surrounding values. So think about my hands. So when one knuckle meets the other knuckle, it blocks out the light, creating this dark line that you see in between the knuckles. And that's the same thing, same phenomenon that's going on under here. Remember, thinner paint tends to stick onto thicker paint, so I will probably add some medium to the brush. And I misplaced my maul stick, so I'm just going to use a ruler. So if you or someone you know may be interested in purchasing this painting, please check out the link in the comments. Also, the link is posted in the description box of this video. So once again, the price for this painting has been lowered, so I have lowered my prices. And there you have the Etsy listing. A 3D printer. Okay, so there we have the accent. Okay, so a few more details to the stem, and this should be just about finished. A lot of painting done in a very short amount of time. Throw in a little Cobalt Blue. So that should be it with this painting. I'm going to stand back, make sure I didn't miss anything. So this is the last minute adjustment stage. I don't think I've missed anything. I know I haven't missed anything, except for a signature. So we're going to sign this, and then I will photograph it after the stream ends, and I will update the picture on the Etsy page. Signing it in purple, more of a grayish purple. Oh, thank you 3D printers for following me on Instagram. Yeah, if you want to see my finished work, everyone, please check out my Instagram. It is linked in the description box. I'm going to sign it right over here. When you sign a painting wet on wet, you've got to thin out the paint. I'm using a Sable to sign it. So genuine, authentic painting of mine is available for sale. If you like this painting, you have a chance to own it. Alright, there it is. It is signed Yupari 2022. I think that's the year, right? 2022 now. Yep, it is a completed painting that has been signed, and the picture will be updated on the Etsy link that you're seeing here. So after the stream, I will update the picture, and that'll be it. It is a completed painting that is available for sale. So wish me luck. I definitely left this glow in the background on purpose, almost like a magical glow. I like this effect to oil paintings. Can't tell you why. It's just I like the way that looks. 3D printers. Yep, never finished, merely abandoned. Yep, that is one quote. Although let's just call this one finished. Abandoned just doesn't sound appealing. So I'm adjusting the easel so you can see it with less distortion now. Alright, so there it is, completed painting. I'm going to hang out for a couple minutes, see if there are any last minute questions. And once again, special thank you to Stephanie Thompson for your super chat. Let me move the palette and make sure it's not casting a shadow. 3D printers, do you use cool light and warm shadows? It depends. I mean, if there is a, for example, there's a cool light and a warm shadow, but there is a cool object in the background that's casting a reflected light, and that can break that rule. In this case, it was a cool-ish light, but still with warm undertones, and there was actually, in fact, a cool reflected light in the shadows. So that did break the rule a little bit, but usually I'll stick with something similar to that. So 3D printers, can I explain the theory behind getting light and shadow separated aside from value? I don't think that light and shadow exist separate from value. Light and shadow are two values. Everything else between light and shadow is the midtones. That is between the highlight, should I say, between the highlight. So this is the highlight and this is the accent. This is your lightest light, your darkest dark. Everything exists in between. This is the major light and the major shadow. Everything in the light cannot be confused with anything in the shadow unless, like the stem here, there is a physical value change here that is receiving light. That's my theory behind it. Yep. Alright, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. So once again, thank you so much for watching. Remember, as always, if you want to take your online art education with me further, please check out my online classes on patreon.com/youpariartist. Classes start at just $10 a month. Once again, thank you all so much. Don't forget that this painting is going to be available for sale. So if you're watching this as a pre-recorded video, this painting should still be available for sale. So thanks again. Take care. Wish you the very best, and I'll see you on the next one.